This is the best internet video ever. Or it's just the best that I can do. But one of those certainly is true. Today we are going to look at CSS FlexBox Essentials. I'm going to take you through the ideas, yes, the properties and values that you will need to create layouts with FlexBox. When this video is done, you will be sufficiently prepared to use FlexBox in your layouts. As a bonus, check out this video here in which we put our learnings to use and build some small UI elements using our FlexBox skills. Alright, now let's begin. Okay, I'm using CodePen in this exercise, and I usually use Sass and Jade in my videos because they are awesome, but this time I thought maybe I'll just try using vanilla HTML and CSS to make it a little bit more accessible for people who are, this is the first time they're watching my videos. So if you see me leaving off brackets or semicolons, that's why I don't ever write them usually. Also, you should be aware that I am using in these code examples auto prefixer, which takes care of cross-browser compatibility. See, FlexBox is still a little bit of a dicey thing. So if in your production code you need to support IE9, you might not want to be using FlexBox. Okay, what is FlexBox? This is what MDN, the Mozilla Developer Network, has to say about it. The CSS3 FlexBox or FlexBox is a layout mode providing for the arrangement of elements on a page such that the elements behave predictably when the page layout must accommodate different screen sizes and display different devices. For many applications, the flexible box model provides an improvement over the block model in that it does not use floats, nor does the flex container's margins collapse with the margins of its contents. Did you get all that? I'm not sure if that's super clear on what it is, but let me kind of explain that and walk you through that. What I'm going to do is I'm just going to go up to that definition here in the markup, and I'm going to put a class hide, so you're gone. All right. Now, in these next few examples, I'm going to be reusing this box, but when you go back and look at this CodePen, because I'm going to have the CodePen in the link down in the description below, I'm going to have all of the examples listed one after another so that you can easily step through them without having to destroy and rewrite the code every time, but I'm just going to be destroying and rewriting it as we work through this. What you should really understand about this structure here is that I have a div, which is a class of parent, and I've set its border to like this coral color. It's like an orangey red color, and padding of 0. I don't know why padding of 0 is there. That doesn't make sense. It's normally padding 0. Okay, so I just gave it a 5-pixel border. All that this parent has at the current moment by default is a 5-pixel border. Next is the item, and there's 5 items in there, and they're numbered 1 through 5 in the content of the item. They have a height and a margin, just kind of styles that you can see right here. Now, you'll notice that by default these are just divs, right? So they're block level elements, which mean that each of these blue guys right here, these blue items, because they're a block level element, they cause the next element to be on its new line, right? That's what block level elements do. If you're not familiar with the different display types, please check out my video in the HTML5 basics that I did like 2 years ago. I think that's the one where I draw on my face. So maybe that might be entertaining for you. Click the link right there. Now that we've seen this HTML, I'm just going to get rid of it, but you can remember what it's like later on. Now let's take a moment to remember what Mozilla said about FlexBox, that it's a display property, right? So currently we know that our displays are block levels. And if we want to change this into a FlexBox layout, we have to change that display property to flex. So that's literally what we're going to do. We're going to identify the parent and say display flex. Now, we're dealing with FlexBox. It's just that easy. All you have to say is display flex. Done. Okay? So we have a display flex here. Now keep in mind that this is being auto prefixed. So if your target browser is Mozilla or WebKit, you may want to prefix that. And let me show you what I mean. In CodePen, if I click this little eyeball, you can see that the auto prefixer is doing this work. So this is the rendered CSS, and this is actually what I'm writing right here. So don't be fooled. This is all browser compliant, but ideally you'd be writing just something as simple as display flex. Now on the right here, you can see the results of display flex. These item boxes here are no longer causing each other to go onto a new line. They're kind of stacked up in a row, and they each have 5 pixels of margin. So if I go into item, that margin gets kind of sucked in. So what I want to do, just so we can see this a little bit better, I'll take that margin, put it back onto the items, and I'll give it a width. I'll define its width. Width, you're going to say 50 pixels. Okay, so from here there's tons and tons of things we can do with the display flex property. It's actually a very flexible display model. And so I'm just going to step you through a lot of the things we can do right now. All right, now notice that the numbers here are 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 for our items. And I can take the flex direction and say row reverse. Now they're lining up all the way to the right, and they're kind of starting at that number 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So this is a way to reverse the stack of items that are in your FlexBox parent, right? But notice how this is affecting the children though. The parent itself, right, the red box, is not really doing anything different. It's still holding its children, but the children are being reversed, right? They're in a row. We can actually say, instead of being so the default of this property is row, we can say that we don't want them to be a row, we can be in a column. And they'll stand up from top to bottom. We can actually say, I think we can do column reverse too. Yeah, now they're starting at the 5, actually they're starting at the bottom, working our way backwards, right? So now, like already, right off the bat, compared to display block, we have so much like flexibility. I keep on, that's kind of, I'm describing it with its own self. But we have so many options in just the way that we're ordering and organizing the way that these things flow, right? So that's called flex direction. The next property is, let's say, flex wrap. And by default, it's going to be no wrap, right? And let me show you. So that doesn't look any normal, but if I take these widths and I say, instead of 50 pixels, I say 50%, see what happened there? By default, let me just get flex no wrap, just so you're not confused by that. By default, the maximum width of a container, or sorry, an item inside of the parent, if the parent is flexed, is, I don't know how you define this, the maximum width is the maximum width it can have, even if it's set to something higher. So like if I set this width to 500 pixels, it's still going to be 1/5 of the space available to it, right? Because it's constrained by its parent. A flex parent doesn't let his children outside normally, naturally, without being overridden. And also, the children of a flex parent are all in one row all the time, ever. Unless you go up here and you say flex wrap. Now these 500 pixels, these 50%ers, these guys can wrap. Let me change that to 30% so you can see that they are indeed wrapping, right? So they're just taking up as much space as you tell them to, and then if they're too many, they just wrap. That is the beauty of flex wrap. You can also wrap reverse, I think. Yeah, see, we're starting at the bottom left there and going this way and then the top. So that's wrap reverse. Next, I want to show you one of my very favorite ones. I'm going to take this width back down to 50 pixels. I happen to use, I just end up using this next one a lot, but it's called justify content. The default is called Flex Start, and that's nothing surprising. That's what you see right there, not startle, start. That's what you see. That's just when it starts in the beginning of the FlexBox and moves out. You can make that flex end to where we're not leading with one and working our way back like we did when we did the row reverse, when we did flex direction. But now we're just taking the whole content and just sliding it over to where it's butting up on the right, and we do that with flex end, so it's at the end of the flex container. There's also something simple like center. Now, a little bit ago we did a video about centering HTML or centering with CSS, and that was a lot of fun, but I didn't even talk about flex at all. Maybe because I forgot. Maybe because I wanted to save it for this video. You decide. But anyway, centering in a FlexBox is really, really simple. It's just justify content center, and that's how you can center horizontally. And each of the items, and so we centered one thing in that video, but here you center whole groups of things, right? The whole group moves to the center, and they're all centered. Okay, here are a few interesting ones. This one is called space between. Space between justifies the content. It takes the first one and puts it all the way to the left, and the last one all the way to the right, and makes the space between them all equidistant. And the last property available for justify content is very similar to space between. It's called space around. And instead of throwing the first all the way to the left and the last all the way to the right, it actually takes those, how do you say this? So the space between 1 and 2 here, half of that is on the right, on the left of 1 and on the right of 5, right? So you can imagine that each item has the same amount of margin, and the ones on the right and the left just kind of get half of what's in between. So this is a better way of making things not look like whoa stretch, but all things like kind of centered equally. It's nice. I use this one quite a lot actually in my layouts. All right, for this next one, I want to make the parent height a little bit taller. I'm going to say height 200 pixels. Semicolon. I forgot my semicolon. I told you I would. All right, height 200 pixels. Now we want to say we're going to do another property called align items. Okay. Now align items deals with not where it is on the right and left. Well, everything kind of been doing here, like basically the x-axis. Align items deals with the y-axis. We have a 200 pixel tall parent, and we're going to align items. Of course, the default property is when they're all at the top, and that's called flex start. Look at that. Can you guess what the aligning into the bottom is? It's very similar to what we just looked at with justify content. It's flexed end. Flex end will take them all the way to the bottom when you're dealing with align items. Remember, align items is the y-axis, and justify content is this one, the x-axis. Okay, so flex end, we also have center, which you might have guessed also, and then this one, which is lots of fun, stretch. Oh. I think I have a height defined on these guys. Yes. So if I take off the height, it'll stretch. So that stretch, let me put it back to 50. And then this last one is called baseline. And it's a little bit harder to describe when we have only, actually I can do this. Item, let's say item, nth child number 3, and we'll say to you font size 30 pixels. Okay, now you see what happened just there? Let me make that even more. Let's say 80 pixels. Okay, now you see what's going on right here? The they're all aligned to the baseline. They all share a baseline. See how that 2 lines up with the 3, lines up with the 4? Even though the 3 is massively larger than the others, all the items are aligned to the baseline, just like the property says. Cool, huh? The next one I want to show you is called align content. And it's very similar to justify content as it moves things in groups. But there is a subtle difference in that this applies to the content, the items, when they wrap, right? Let me show you what I mean. We have currently 50 pixel items widths, and they don't wrap. They just make a half of a row at the top. And if I put align content center, nothing will happen. It won't move. It won't look any different. Right? This is probably one of the most confusing ones, so pay attention right here. Nothing will happen. If I make the width 20%, oops, not 25, $20 20%, it's still not wrapping. In fact, 10%, it's still not wrapping. If I add the property that we talked about previously called flex wrap, actually I want to add that right here, and say wrap, now when I put them on 20%, they will wrap. And the group will be moved to the center. Do you see how that happened? Let me comment align center out. So this is what you would see, a distribution. The default, by the way, of this is actually this stretch. And the reason that you didn't see that right away is because I have the height labeled as 50%. So now I've taken off the height. So the height will flex, and they're gonna do the default for align content, which is stretch. So if something wraps, it's gonna stretch. Actually, you don't even need to have any wrapping or anything. But if you have no height labeled, see, I had the height labeled the whole time. That's why they were like little boxes up at the top. But if you don't label the height, or define the height rather, the boxes will stretch all the way to the top. The align content default is stretch. So if I go back and I say flex content wrap, align content stretch, there's other ones, right? We looked at center. You can center them. You can say flex start, and they'll all group up to the top. You could say flex end, and they'll all group down to the bottom. And you can also do the other ones we've seen, which are space around and space between. And those don't actually, but in that case, if you're going to do space around, you need to have a defined height, not space. You need to have a defined height, and if you're going to do that, and then that also, defining the height also opens up space between for you too. Okay, so they're to the top and the bottom depending on what the wrap, right? Okay, so align content is on the Y. Now, we've been looking at the different properties and how they affect the X and the Y, right? But remember the first property that we just did? And that one was called flex direction. Imagine flex direction changing the X and the Y. And now these properties like align content that we did, it wouldn't do, oh, let me align it to the vertical here. It would align to the center because our flex direction would change. Let me show you that. Flex direction reverse. Nope, that's not what I wanted. I wanted a column. See? 1, 2, 3, space between, 4, 5. It's not tilting the content, right? I didn't mean to imply that it was going to tilt the content on its side. I meant that it would tilt the way you distribute the space in FlexBox. So there's a lot of nuance involved with FlexBox, but it's a really powerful tool, especially when we've been working with floats and clears and like inline blocks and blocks for the longest time. Now we have these really intricate tools such as FlexBox. But that is not all. So all these things that we've looked at so far have been applied to the parent of the items. We haven't really changed the items themselves. Let's look at some of the properties that a direct child of a display flex element can have. The first one is something called order. So if I go item, and let's do an nth child selector. Let's grab the second one. So this is the one that should be labeled as number 2 because it's the second in the DOM. And we will just give it an order and then a number. So you can choose number 1, and you see what happens. The number, the order of the display, not the DOM, because the DOM is still the normal, isn't how it was, right? But the order of the display of these items has been changed. Number 2 has been moved all the way to the back. Well, the back, why? We said number 1, why would it go to the back? Well, the back, the reason it went to the back is because the other ones have not a declared order. If you declare an order, if you declare a number that's greater than 1, they would go behind it. Let me show you an example of that. So here we have nth child, let me scroll that up, number 3, and I'm going to give it order number 2. Now you see how 3 is behind 2 right here in these little blue boxes? What happened is that if you can imagine the items that are not declared as an order, they're kind of like this group. They're here, they're 0. Right? Let's just say they're 0. Maybe they're actually supposed to be there. And if you declare an order, it will go 1 or 2 and so on and so on. If you do -1, you go in front of 0. See how 2 is back in front now? Because I put a negative number on it. So in this way you can manipulate the order of things. You can also, let's say you can put the same order on 2 elements and they will kind of default into their rows. And let's make another one of these here. Let's take number 5 and put it as order number 3. Number 5 goes at the end. So 2 and 3 are in order 1. 5 is in order, 2 and 3 are in order 2. 5 is in order 3. So you see, 2 things can have the same order. So just think of these as groups, not literal single objects. Group no group declared is 0. Am I talking about this too much? I'm just like figuring it out on my own too right now. But the idea is if you don't declare an order, it's in group 0. If you do declare it in an order, it's in the group of whatever number you declared it, and it can be positive or negative numbers. Negative numbers are in front, positive numbers are behind because 0, right? Okay, let's move on. The next property I want to show you is, let's actually get rid of 50 pixels. The next property I want to show you is something that will distribute the width. We want to call it flex grow. Not glex grow. What are you doing? That's ridiculous. Flex grow. The default is 0. But if you put 1, you can have everything stretch out equally. So flex grow is an interesting kind of thing. One of the harder things that I'm still trying to use and understand pretty well, but the idea is you can control the ratio of how much each one of these individually will grow. So if they're all labeled as 1 right here, and I take the second one and tell it to flex grow, flex afro, flex grow 2, it'll be twice the size. Flex 3 as well will be like that. If I could take item number, let's say item number 4, and make it grow flex 1, oh, they're all flex 1, flex 8, it will distribute it out according to the ratio that we chose, right? There's also a property called flex shrink, which is the opposite of grow. Actually, wait, so it doesn't make things grow, it enables the ability to shrink if necessary, right? So let me show you what I mean. So let's grab the nth child 2 and say flex shrink 3, I don't know. And do we see anything changing? We do not, because there's enough space here to accommodate for each of these 5 elements having 50 pixels in width. But if I change this to, let's say, 150, we notice that that we're normally, so let me, okay. Now we see that the flex kind of like distribution of widths is happening again, and they're all equal in width, even though they're not 150. They're as much as they can be before the flex container will keep them in. But flex shrink enables one of them to shrink. See how the 2 got smaller? That's flex shrink. And the last one of this kind of group that goes onto the children, the items here, is called flex basis, right? Flex basis. Basis? It's a weird word if you say it enough. Basis. It's like bassist, but like bases? All your bases? Bassist? Basis. What flex basis does is it sets a starting place before the element begins to flex or shrink. So it's kind of like setting the width. So let's say flex basis for the element 2 here is 39 OX, whatever that is, pixels. 39 pixels. 39. You can see it's kind of like setting the width a little bit, but it's not, because if the flex direction is column, you can see that it's still impacting the 2 as it's 39 pixels. Let me make it even smaller. Let's say 13 pixels, 19 pixels, whatever. 19 pixels. The flex basis is not the width, because when I changed the direction of the flow, the flex direction, the flex basis became the standard for the height. So it's a little bit more flexible than width and height. But it acts kind of like those. It's the basis before it begins to grow or flex. Very confusing to me. Maybe you guys can make it more clear to me in the comments what this thing does. But that's available to it. And now there's a shorthand for flex, all these flex grows, flex shrink, and flex basis, and that's just called flex. Flesh. Flex. And you would do that like flex number, you'd say 2, 3, and 30 pixels. That's not 23. You would say 2, 3, 30 pixels. And the last property I want to show you is something called align self, which is really, really interesting. So let's take these, let's make this flex direction go back to row. All right. And let's say we want to take that second item again and align self. Align self. We know about the default, which is flex start. Let's make it flex end. And this no longer needs to be 800 pixels tall. Okay, so what happened there is it got sent to the bottom of the parent, right? It got aligned to the end of the flex when you're talking about alignments, not justification, right? Cool, and it's doing it by itself. We're no longer looking at the group. This is just one item in the group, which is pretty useful. Now the different properties there are flex end, there's center, there's, you can do flex start, like we've seen already, that's like the default. And you can also do stretch, which is not working because, why is it not working? That's why it's not working, because there is a defined height. But as soon as I turn that height off, flex stretch would let it just assume as much space as it needed within the content. Now keep in mind that these are all auto. If all of these were height auto, they would be stretching down. Or in other words, if I took the height off here, height auto just resets that. That's what I was doing. It doesn't need to be height auto. Just that there's no height declared. I'm just talking now. Cool, I think that's all that I wanted to show you. We are done here. You are now sufficiently prepared to make a layout in FlexBox. You should watch this next video where we use all these ideas to lay out some pretty internet stuff. If you enjoyed this video, please consider subscribing, because I put out a new video every Monday and you can watch all of those too. In the meantime, keep on hacking. All right, let's shut it down. Shut it down.